All right, we're going to find out what happens if you're playing golf with bent golf shafts. Let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're having a wonderful day. So this was not the video I was planning on doing today, but I was reshafting some clubs this morning and using some shaft pulls, aka used shafts that the client had brought me, and I realized that one of them actually had a bent tip. And that got me thinking, you know what, that would be a great idea for a video. What happens if you are playing with golf clubs where the shafts are actually bent? So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, when we're talking about bent shafts, we are basically just talking about steel shafts. Steel shafts definitely can either develop a bend or get a bend just in one moment and retain that bend, and you're still able to hit the club, you're still able to play golf with them, and you may not even realize that it is bent. I have had tons of people come through here, they bring me their current gamer set, and I take a look at them and realize really quick that, you know, some of these shafts are actually bent down here at the tip. They had no idea, because in a lot of cases, this bend is happening slowly over time. It's not usually just a moment where you bang your club on a tree or something and it makes a bend right there. In many cases, it's a slower process from just repeated hitting off of mats, hard swinging, or just, maybe quality control issues with the shaft, and it works its way more and more bent, but you don't necessarily see it because it's in such small amounts that it's moving. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a steel shaft that, as far as I can tell, is perfectly straight right now. I'm going to hit a few baseline shots with it, and then I'm going to put a bend in that shaft, and we're going to take that same shaft and we're going to start hitting balls with it, but we're going to take that bend and actually change the orientation of it, rotate it around in the head so that we can see what happens when the bend is actually facing in different directions. All right, let's get some baselines. I've got a Sub 70 669 TC head here, which is a club that I plan on doing a review of at some point. I just haven't gotten to it yet, but figured I'd use it for this video. And I've got a steel, obviously, Project X shaft here, and we are hitting 7-irons. That was a little straighter. All right, so I've now just gone and bent this shaft about 2 degrees, put it in the loft fly machine, and just started wrenching on the shaft itself instead of on the hosel of the club like you would typically do. And so we now have what I think is probably a pretty typical amount of bend. It's enough there where I can obviously see that it's bent, but it's not some crazy amount that you wouldn't ever actually see out in real life on the golf course. So I did get a little bit of a kink right here because when I did it, I forced it all at once. If you have clubs that are bending, most likely they probably won't have a kink because it's happening over time in most cases. If it gets dropped on its head, or if you bang it on something, or you kind of jam it down, that kind of thing, then you might get a kink. But in most cases, you probably won't see it. So the best way to actually tell if a golf shaft is bent or if it's straight is to just take it, hold it up to your eye like this, and just look down the shaft, starting at the grip end, and just start rotating the head around. I like to close my left eye and just use my dominant eye when I do this. And what you will see is, if it is bent, you'll be able to actually pick up on it and see that there's that little bit of curve in the shaft, and as you rotate it around, that curve moves with it. And that's the easiest way to tell if one of your shafts or multiple shafts have some bend in them. All right, so let's now hit some balls with this first new setup, which I am calling flat, basically meaning that the shaft is now bent this way. So it's essentially making the golf club play a little bit flatter in the lie angle. So we're going to see what happens now with this setup. Looking down at it, you don't really notice anything different. It looks pretty typical. If I didn't know that I had just bent it, I don't know that I would have picked up on it, but it's hit really nicely right there. Okay, I had to put a new dot on it. Anytime I use the Loft Lie machine, these little reflective dots get kind of scuffed up and then they don't actually record. So I'm going to keep that shot, but we just didn't get the club data side of it because the dot was a little bit, was a little compromised. So hopefully this should now work better. Now you will notice from a number of these shots, including that one, my start line and my ball flight definitely a little bit further to the right, which is exactly what you would expect if you were playing with a flatter lie angle golf club. So all of that is definitely checking out. Okay, I've now rotated the bend in the shaft into what I'm calling a lower loft setup, which means basically if we hold the club like this, the shaft is now leaning backwards like this. So if you set it up straight up and down, that loft is now decreasing. So we've made the loft stronger. This is a very common bend orientation when I see golf clubs come in here. Probably more times than not, if there's going to be some bend in a shaft, it's going to look like this, where the shaft is actually pointing away from the target and you are de-lofting those irons. Now, when I set up with this, I actually pick up on what looks like a little bit more offset, which is, again, what you would kind of expect anytime you strengthen a golf club, you bring more offset into it. And since that's basically what we're doing here, just in the shaft versus the hosel, you do, again, pick up on that little bit more offset type of setup to it. It may be a touch low on the face, but not bad. That was a good swing, a good result. Okay, next up, we've rotated it again 90 degrees. This is what I'm going to be referring to as the upright bend orientation, because the shaft is now bending like this, which means that at address, at impact, the head is pointed a little more upright, the toe is pointed a little bit more up. When I set this down behind the ball, immediately I can see that toe is pointing back up towards me quite a bit more than it was in the first two settings. So let's see what happens with this bend setup. It's a good shot right there. Another good swing. All right. Okay, and finally we've got this now set in the loft weaker orientation as far as where that bend is. So if we're looking at the club and the toe is pointing directly out towards the camera, the shaft is now bending like this. And what that's doing is adding extra loft to the face. So in theory, this should now go a little bit shorter than any of the other ones. We'll see if it actually does or not, but that's what it should do. Also, kind of like when I was talking about the offset in the stronger lofted bend setup, here we get the exact opposite thing happening, which is if you look down at the club here, you see very little offset in this head now. That was hit really well. And here's the numbers. This is pretty much what I would expect to see based on those different shaft bend setups. If we had lower loft or we had a more upright lie angle, we're going to see shots a little bit more to the left, and we're going to see them go a little bit further. If we had the flatter lie angle or we had the weaker loft, then the shots were a little bit more to the right on average, and they were a little bit shorter on distance overall. Pretty much what you would expect to see, and even with my inconsistent swing, I think the patterns still show you what you would expect. So, moral of the story, first off, make sure if you've got steel shafts that you check them every so often to make sure that those shafts are actually straight and haven't been either bent in a moment or bent over a longer period of time just from use, just from wear, because it can definitely change how that club plays. And if one club is bent and another club isn't, then it can throw off distances, it can throw off your consistency moving through the set. So definitely something you want to keep an eye on. All right, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you go down below, like, comment, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you'll be alerted when I post new videos. Hey, make sure you're also following me on Instagram. I've got plans to be giving away some more stuff as my subscriber numbers, both on YouTube and Instagram, increase. So if you like free stuff, then make sure you're following me on Instagram. Hey, if you're interested in fitting in a custom build and repair, all my contact information is down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.